right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining another episode here of Cockpit Counsel. My name is Tim. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at LinkSquares, and joining me today is Jonathan, who is my first hire on the legal team. Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, no, appreciate it, Tim. So I have been here now for about 2 months, and I've been working in-house for a little over 10 years. I actually, prior to going to law school, I did the Peace Corps, and so
Nice.
took that. It was actually interesting because you learn a lot of just valuable practical skills in a role like that. So after going to law school, I actually went directly in-house. I worked at a tech company in the energy management space for 4 years. There I wore a lot of hats, but the primary role was commercial contracts and also actually working on our contract management system at the time. So there was a heavy role. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that later.
Right.
So then fast forward from that, I ended up working at another company also in the tech space called Savvy Technology. And there I also wore multiple hats. There I actually worked in HR. As is, I think, the trend, HR and legal are starting to collapse a little bit more. And so there I was actually doing traditional HR roles in addition to the legal role, working in an in-house tech company. And then recently, I was at a cybersecurity company in the email phishing space. And there I worked in a commercial counsel role and negotiated. The primary role was negotiating contracts with large enterprise customers.
Nice. And then you jumped onto LinkSquares. Cool. So one thing before we get into the couple of topics to talk about today, do you have a pre-flight ritual?
I do. It's I always check the morning of the flight to make sure my TSA pre-check is on my boarding pass.
Yeah.
Because I know if it's not on there, I am not making that flight.
All right, so you're one of those like run through the airport kind of people then, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm the nobody else is actually boarding and they're about to close the door, and I like to smoothly then just sort of hand my ticket and hop on.
That's awesome. So it's obviously a little bit different. Having somebody else from LinkSquares on here. I think the last time we did that was with Vishal, and I think that was our kickoff episode, which was pretty fun. We talked a lot about our Series B fundraise, but when you joined, there were probably about 100 or so people here, maybe 120. Tell me a little bit about what that experience has been like for you. Jumping in and sort of grabbing onto this for dear life, trying to hold on.
Well, I think when you just have the volume of work, which is a great thing, particularly in the contract space that we do, it's pretty easy to jump in. So I would say it's actually very exciting, and I think the first thing that I think we even talked about this in the interview was the most important thing when I got here was to just build the relationships with the business team, make sure folks knew that we're business partners and we're here to support. And I think it has been there's been a lot going on, but I think that makes our work and the process around it just so much smoother. And it's been pretty easy to integrate because I think our business team has been pretty appreciative of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it's critical, and that was something that definitely we did talk about a lot in the interview process, was really like having a passion for developing those relationships and forming that partnership between the revenue organization and the legal function. So any tips? Do you have any tips for folks who are maybe coming into a high growth stage organization, with like very heavy, AE driven, sales rep driven revenue function?
Yeah. So, I mean, tip number one is sort of going back to that is your relationships are key. And I think it's easy to lose the human aspect when you're focusing on a technical skill. And that's in our trade, that's just something you can lose. Forgetting the human aspect is not something you just can't lose sight of. Like you always have to remember that you're always dealing with humans. And so just being able to interact with all the AEs at that human level, I think is very important, and always keeping sight of that. And then I think it's also very important when you're working with your business colleagues to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, because when they understand that, they're supportive, and they are negotiating with you rather than trying to undercut you in any way. And so I think that's also very important when you're stepping into a high growth tech company with a lot of sales volume.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is an important point, and at some level it helps. I've found, at least throughout my career, it actually helps me to crystallize issues and crystallize positions if I have to explain it to a non-lawyer, right? Because you really have to put it in terms that are like, why does this limitation of liability really matter, right? Why does this indemnification provision really matter? If you can explain to a business person and get them to be on your side and be like, oh, that makes perfect sense why we would do that, then usually you find yourself in a pretty good spot to be able to go back and get at least close to what you need out of that. So yeah, it's that's an excellent part of the job for sure.
Absolutely. And when you're stepping into a new role in particular, once you explain it, to be quite honest, you're also familiarizing yourself with the company and the product, and they can provide you a lot of insight and like details into operations, et cetera, that can sort of help bolster those arguments, so you can speak very intelligently to the counterparty who has the questions or the concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Jonathan, when you think about sort of where your career path is going, right? How is this role, and I'm certain that this is a little bit challenging given that I'm your direct manager, but no, like when you think about your career 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whether it's at LinkSquares or elsewhere, that's not what this is about. What happens today that gets you to where you want to be, and where do you want to be?
That's a good question. So I think if I can talk about sort of what helped make my selection, the selection process with LinkSquares, and sort of what attracted me to the company, I think at this point in my career, it's going to be very similar to where I am in 5 years. And I think the most important thing was you want to work in an exciting space. And if I do probably expect to be in-house. So working in-house, I would expect to work for an exciting company. The people here have just been absolutely amazing, and so I want to work with good people, and that to me is just such an important part of the job. And then I think you're always looking for some level, some type of growth, and it doesn't always have to be a job title growth. Right now, my career is at a path where there has been job title growth at each stage, and it's been incremental. Where in 5 years, you sort of hit a point where there's potentially opportunities where you're growing in job title, but there's also there's other opportunities where it might be a different job title, but the role is very interesting and it's an opportunity to learn something new. So I think always being in growth mindset.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hopefully what you're doing here is is putting you on that right path. And obviously as we continue to grow and continue to see our organization develop, like the legal role is obviously going to develop along with it. And so when you think about like your hiring decision, so for those listening, I've tasked Jonathan with really putting together a plan and figuring out, okay, how do we grow our department and how do we grow it consistent with the scale of the rest of the business? And so Jonathan, I'd love to just hear you talk just a couple of minutes about some guiding principles that you think about when you're thinking about, all right, what's my next legal hire and what's the hire after that? What does that look like? What does the profile look like? And even from like a size and scale of the organization, like how does the timing of that plan sort of shift?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one, you're always looking at sort of what is the business need. I think one of the great things, given that contracts is such a focus of an in-house department, one of the great things with our tool is the opportunity to really get deep insights into what the contract work is that an individual is doing. And so being able to sort of stay abreast of that and to have that really important data is very important and something that helps in the decision-making process. When I am looking to make a hire, I'm looking for somebody who's going to sort of fit a business need and a sort of a major, whatever the pain points are as far as sort of the amount of work and the requests coming in. So always thinking about that, and then trying to scale the role to be scale the hire to be the right fit for the organization at that time. And so if it's hiring a commercial contracts, somebody to be focusing on commercial contracts, or somebody to be more of a specialist, over time, is it hiring a generalist or hiring somebody very specific in areas like product and privacy? And that's just keeping abreast with the organization and sort of tracking the growth of the organization and the needs, and just a lot of that's also just internal feedback and knowing more about the business and sort of where the business is going at sort of in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to circle back. Completely unrelated question. I should have asked it in real time. So you're in the Peace Corps, right?
Yeah.
Where'd you go?
So I went to Azerbaijan.
Okay. What was that?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It's just south of Russia, north of Iran, east of Turkey. It was phenomenal. I was with the first Peace Corps group that had gone to the country since they were under the Soviet regime, and post collapse of the Soviet regime. We were essentially the first Westerners to be there and live in that country. And Peace Corps' goal is to have you living in very small villages. So they just throw you into a small village, and you're just essentially supposed to figure it out. And I think that skill of being dropped somewhere and having to figure it out, having to interact with so many different people, doing the things that you used to do with such ease in your everyday life back home. And it's completely different when you're in a foreign country and you need a little additional help, like just buying groceries your first week is a challenge when you don't speak the language. And so you have to have that ability to be able to come into an environment, learn very quickly, and also build a lot of relationships. So it was super cool, and it's something that I've taken with me to sort of my business life since.
And what made you take that step? I mean, so there you were. You're like, what am I going to do next? What was the deciding factor? What was going on in your life at the time?
Yeah, I just wanted to see the world.
Yeah.
Wanted to try new foods. Just wanted to learn new languages. And yeah, I just wanted that sense of what's out there. You graduate college, and it's fun being on campus, but you're in a bit of a bubble, and there's a whole wide world out there. And so it's just fun. You just feel like you've jumped in the deep end, and now you're forced to swim. And that was so cool.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So if you had to give any advice to somebody who's like thinking about going into some type of public service, like whether it's within a legal career or not, what are some of the things that you would warn people about? Be like, you need to be prepared for A, B, C, D, and E that they just don't tell you in sort of the recruiting videos, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's when you're going into a role like that, you just have to remember there's a reality there, and that whatever the vision is, and I think in particular, everybody thinks when they're going into a role like that, like the impact I am going to make, it's subtle. It's
Right.
You see yourself after 3 months helping propel some sort of change, and that's just not going to happen in most public service roles. Potentially during your tenure, or it could even be decades and decades. But oftentimes it does take that time to actually perpetuate whatever change or improvement you're trying to essentially affect. So I just think it's just remembering there's a reality there, and that
Right.
just because you think something like doesn't mean it's usually changing other people's behaviors, and that doesn't happen over a day, nor should it.
Right.
Always.
Exactly. So coming out of that experience, what, if you had to pick a couple of things that really on, maybe not a daily basis, but a very consistent basis, like what are those things that have shaped you and helped you? Is there anything that you can point to from that experience to say, if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be as good at A, B, C, D, or E?
Yeah, I think to me it was, again, going back to the building the relationships. It's really hard to build relationships when you don't speak a language at first.
Right.
And so you get really good at using whatever you have, whatever tool you have to build that relationship. You get very good at it. And you also realize how important sort of anybody can potentially be that you come across and interact with, how important they can be to actually helping you. It's being friends on the street with somebody, and just in that little village, there was one American, and everybody knew who that person was, and they all wanted to chat with you. And so just being respectful of everybody, it would end up becoming so useful. There were several times I was stranded on the side of a road, maybe a car or bus broke down, and then somebody who I didn't remember, but I had somehow greeted them on the street, saw me, and they were like, "Get in, we'll give you a ride."
That's awesome. So getting back a little bit to to sort of present day and what you're doing at LinkSquares, what has been if anything, what has been the most surprising thing about LinkSquares that you didn't necessarily expect when you joined? And what I mean by that is maybe not like necessarily specific to LinkSquares, but is there anything that you've encountered that you did not expect going into a company this size, growth stage company, right? Is there anything that sort of took you by surprise?
Yeah, I would actually say this was a really pleasant surprise. Just how approachable our management team here is, and Vishal in particular. The fact that he gets to know all of the employees, he interacts with everybody. It's super cool, and not every organization is like that. And so that was definitely a pleasant surprise. So I would say that's probably been the biggest surprise.
Nice. And anything negative? I know again it's tough, but what's been a challenge that you've had to overcome? Maybe we ask it that way. Like, yeah, my boss.
Yeah, it's, I think one of the challenges that I think you have with any sort of legal group that's building is just where does legal fit right now in the processes. Working at other organizations, it's been different where legal has been positioned, and so you look back to your experience and you ask yourself, well, was that the right approach? Like, let's say legal was a part of this process, should they have been? Does that make sense for this business? And so just trying to figure that out has been something that I was surprised that I would spend so much time thinking about it.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's definitely something that uh, particularly if you're a legal team of one, um, it's tough to really define that, and a lot of times you just have to insert yourself into situations. And when you think about how to grow, how to grow the legal function, that's a big thing that I really think about on a day in and day out basis is, what does LinkSquares legal look like, right? What's the you know what's the day in and day out interaction? Obviously you have certain things that you're going to be involved in, right? You do a financing or something like that, you need the lawyers involved. There's any potential lawsuits or people issues or anything, like you have sort of your typical stuff.
Yep.
But at LinkSquares, it's great being customer zero, right? The fact that we're building software for, like, our company builds software for our function is a really neat perspective to have, and being able to actually try to design a legal organization that provides benefit and insight in an extremely transparent way has been something that's been um, front of mind for me, and something that I've really been trying to push, and really taking advantage of the opportunity to educate all of our team, whether you're in product and engineering, whether you're in the operations function, or you're selling the product and you're on the phones, talking to GCs. It's something that I really wanted to just make sure that the legal function is there to be a teacher as well, and say, listen, these are the problems that we're going with. These are the problems that you're trying to solve. And so when you think about building an organization, a legal organization within a company, like that, finding out where that fit is really important, because it also helps to guide the profile of person that you want to bring into the org, right? When I think about what, like, you're my first hire, obviously, and what really did it for me was, I knew that you were going to be sufficiently competent to review these contracts. It's not horribly complicated, right? It's a SaaS, tech transaction. Okay. Like, you've been doing this for 10 plus years. I'm pretty sure you know what you're doing. Okay. Like, not hugely complicated, but it was everything else sort of about the way that you approach the legal function and the way you think about your role within the business that did it for me. When I start thinking about what this organization looks like, when we have 500 people, and we are doing 2, 3, 4x the number of deals that we're doing today, what does that function need to look like? And is Jonathan the right person to help sort of build and put his fingerprints all throughout the organization, and continue to carry that sort of development of the legal function throughout that growth? And so that fit aspect is something that's absolutely critical.
I appreciate that. I was actually always wondering, because I know there was a lot of stellar resumes submitted, so I was always wondering, like, what how you made that decision. So
yeah, because it is in so many ways, and for anyone who's listening who is a team of one growing to a team of 2, or a team of 10 growing to a team of 15, or with any hire you make, like, I found that, because I've made some really strong hires in my career. I've made some not so strong hires in my career, and in every, I think that the strong hires absolutely, were the folks who were the strong team players, who understood that as an attorney in a company, you're literally just an input. You're nothing more than that, right? And the business can choose to do what the business wants to do with that input that you provide. And so, like, bringing that sense of humility and that sense of, like, understanding where your place is has been a hallmark of the successful people, at least that I've worked with, and been fortunate enough to stand next to. And sort of the other side of that coin, where I found that people have failed, is is really people who are thinking me first instead of team first. And so, you know, that and people who try to play this whole like, oh, you know, I'm not going to take a position on an issue. I'm just going to tell you this is what the law is and let you fall on your face making whatever decision, so I can say, oh, that's not my problem. I just told you what the law is. You made your choice. Sorry, that's not me. Right? Like those are the people that for me in my organizations didn't last very long. And, you know, not necessarily because they were bad lawyers. They just didn't take any ownership of anything. Right? And so like having that perspective, that humility, and owning what you're doing has been the hallmarks of a successful hire. And you know, I think Jonathan, you exemplify all of that, which has been great. So I know we've just got a couple of minutes left. Jonathan, any last minute thoughts? Anything else that okay, this is going to sound like a weird question, but any one thing that people would be surprised to hear about you that has nothing to do with your work?
Ooh, something that
any weird hobby or anything like that? Like I fly airplanes. That's, you know, that's my sort of fun hobby.
Yeah, so I think
but
yeah, which by the way, you owe me that flight.
that's well, listen, next time you need to get back to DC, I'll take you down there. It's no problem.
Yeah, I would say my I don't know how weird these hobbies are. I try to keep it pretty normal. But I'm a regular hot yoga attendee.
Okay.
So yeah.
And any advice for someone going to their first hot yoga class? What to expect?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is gonna get a little meta here, but when you I would say prepare yourself to do your best and not try too hard, because you're not going to make it to the second class if you try too hard, because you probably don't know what you're doing. and you'll never do the incremental steps that you need to actually make the change. And so it's actually pretty hilarious to see these like pretty like athletic, usually they're dudes,
right?
Pretty athletic dudes who go to the yoga class and like run out after like 10 or 15 minutes because they've been trying so hard and they don't really know how to engage the muscles the right way.
Okay.
That they just overheat. And really all you need to do at that point is just stop and relax. And you don't even need to, they tell you in the class, you don't need to do everything that everybody else is doing, but these folks can't not like try to do everything at 110% and show off, like, you know, show that they can do it. So I would say that's and I think that's a good metaphor for life. That's where I get a little meta.
Yeah, I like it. Don't try too hard. All right. Maybe that's not the right way to do it, but yeah.
Change happens in incremental stages.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much. It's been great having you on, and you know, and also, you know, great having you as the second member of the legal function here. It's been great, and all the feedback from the organization has been positive. So keep up the good work, keep supporting it, and you know, for everyone who joined, thanks so much for joining. We'll see you next time.
Classic. Thanks, Tim.